So for the final panel of today's seminar, we'd like to invite Professor Qiulin Yan from Renmin University of China, Professor Jianyong Zhou from Renmin University. For the final panel of today's seminar, we'd like to invite Professor from the Federal University of Renmin University of China. We also the coordinator of the Zhou from the final panel of the seminar of Europe between Leipzig and Professor from the University of Renmin University of China. We also the coordinator of the Zhou from the final panel of the seminar of Europe between Leipzig and Professor from the University of Renmin University of China. We also the coordinator of the Zhou from the final panel of the seminar of Europe between Leipzig and Professor from the University of Renmin University of China. We also the coordinator of the Zhou from the final panel of the seminar of Europe between Leipzig and Professor from the University of Renmin University of China. We also the coordinator of the Zhou from the final panel of the seminar of Europe between Leipzig and Professor from the University of Renmin University of China. We also the coordinator of the Zhou from the final panel of the seminar of Europe between Leipzig and Professor from the University of Renmin University of China. We also the coordinator of the Zhou from the final panel of the seminar of Europe between Leipzig and Professor from the University of Renmin University of China. We also the coordinator of the Zhou from the final panel of the seminar of Europe between Leipzig and Professor from the University of Renmin University of China. We also the coordinator of the Zhou from the final panel of the seminar of Europe between Leipzig and Professor from the University of Renmin University of China. We also the coordinator of the Zhou from the final panel of the seminar of Europe between Leipzig and Professor from the University of Renmin University of China. We also the coordinator of the Zhou from the final panel of the seminar of Europe between Leipzig and Professor from the University of Renmin University of China. We also the coordinator of the Zhou from the final panel of the seminar of Europe between Leipzig and Professor from the University of Renmin University of China. We also the coordinator of the Zhou from the final panel of the seminar of Europe between Leipzig and Professor from the University of Renmin University of China. We also the coordinator of the Zhou from the final panel of the seminar of Europe between Leipzig and Professor from the University of Renmin University of China. We also the coordinator of the Zhou from the final panel of the seminar of Europe between Leipzig and Professor from the University of Renmin University of China. We also the coordinator of the Zhou from the final panel of the seminar of Europe between Leipzig and Professor from the University of Renmin University of China. We also the coordinator of the Zhou from the final panel of
as an original state. Next page. So this is the resources as an original could be traced back to quite early years, 150. So this is and it is discovered areas could be traced back to quite early years, 150. So this is and it is discovered and areas could be traced back to quite early years, 150. So this is and it is discovered and areas could be traced back to quite early years. So this is and it is discovered and there are specific different cultural regions. So this is and it is discovered and there are specific different cultural regions. So this is and it is discovered and there are specific different cultural regions. So this is and it is discovered and there are specific different cultural regions. So this is and it is discovered and there are specific different cultural regions. So this is and it is discovered and there are specific different cultural regions. So this is and it is discovered and there are specific different cultural regions. So this is and it is discovered and there are specific different cultural regions. So this is and it is discovered and there are specific different cultural regions. So this is and it is discovered and there are specific different cultural regions. So this is and it is discovered and there are specific different cultural regions. So this is and it is discovered and there are specific different cultural regions. So this is and it is discovered and there are specific different cultural regions. So this is and it is discovered and there are specific different cultural regions. So this is and it is discovered and there are specific different cultural regions. So this is and it is discovered and there are specific different cultural regions. So this is and it is discovered and there are specific different cultural regions. So this is and it is discovered and there are specific different cultural regions. So this is
So quite interesting book, very important. And this answer is a comparison between the two religions. The first one, the Buddhism, is a typical form of spontaneous diffusion. It's a diffused religion. Yeah. But in the case of Christianity, he said it is a kind of guided propagation. A guided propagation. And the guided propagation is normally too much pushing for the corrupt intellectuals, but the intellectuals will normally refuse to take such a propagation method. And another later scholars for religious studies, Yang Qingkun and Li Yuan, also used a similar terminology, diffused religion in China and institutionalized religion in the West. He said Christianity in the West took the specific form of institutionalization, while Chinese religion is diffused to your daily life. Yeah? And this is a professor in my university who passed away about 15 years ago, Xu Jun, used to be also my teacher. And his position is quite influential. He said the Buddhism, especially after Song Dynasty, the Buddhism was widely spread in China because of its integration with Confucianism. And on the other hand, Confucianism became more philosophical and metaphysical after Song Dynasty with the help of the resources of Buddhism translated into Chinese. So the next page. I will show you with this picture how much diffused of Christianity, of Buddhism in China. This is the picture taken in Taishan. And Taishan is one of the most famous mountain area of Buddhism. In that mountain area, there are about 200 temples. Yeah. You just try to imagine 200 temples for a foreign religion. For a foreign religion, not a native religion, it's incredible, but it is true. Even now, you can find at least 50 Buddhist temples there. And what is even more incredible is a poetic couplet we discovered in one of the temples. It says, I'm not so sure if you learn Chinese characters or not. This is mountain, and this is color, return to atmosphere or level or some place, some ultimate place. 情 means birth, and this word means sound. Come out, wisdom, and forest. Believe it or not, yeah, the last is my name. It's my name. But I will let you know, to be honest, I have nothing to do with Buddhism. So I just use this case to show how much.
Just to the scorching.
Yeah. To be honest, I really want to make sure with my parents, but anyway, they passed away many years ago. Yeah. So I translated it into English like this. The color of mountain implies the ultimate things. The sounds of birds come from the wisdom forest. So my name, that is what my name means. Wisdom forest, the forest of wisdom, something. The next page. And here you can find some towers erected in that temple areas. Originally, it is from the color, style, and the shape, you can recognize it's an India tower. It's nothing to do with traditional Chinese culture. But gradually, it became typical Chinese tower. Another picture, the next one. And this is a sculpture of Manjari Bodhisattva, Wenju Pusa. And this is the original appearance of the sculpture of the Bodhisattva. Also something from India. And this is a typical Chinese one. The same person, same Bodhisattva. And this is to be believed as a sword. But the sword is not for killing, but for cutting your worries in accordance with Buddhist scriptures. And this seed is lotus. Lotus is a magical symbol of wisdom in Buddhism. And the seed has been replaced as a lion. But in Chinese culture, lion is also a symbol of wisdom. So wisdom is the same, but the shape, the symbol, completely changed. The next page. So I will show you another thing. Even though someone believed that Christianity in China could not be so successful compared with Buddhism, but anyway, I believe the work of the earlier Christian missionaries are quite effective and influential in daily life. So that is the truth, that after the missionary came into China, Europeans and Chinese people have been already living with each other for quite a long time, at least 5 or even more years. That is a philosophy in Germany, Leibniz. And Leibniz was quite aware that in his original work, he said, if I could not escape from old Europe, a philosopher can do nothing to solve the basic problem of philosophy. Yeah. But actually, he could not leave Europe. So the only way for him is try to keep contact, keep in touch with some missionaries from afar. The typical missionaries from afar is missionaries in China. So it is recorded that about 2,000 letters exchanged between Leibniz and the missionaries preserved even now. Only a small part of them, of the letters, has been published. In one of his letters, he wrote, the greatest dream for me, for a philosopher in Germany, that means is to build or establish an academy in Berlin to get scholars from China and Europe together to discuss the basic problems of theology, philosophy, history, or whatever. And another scholar from Germany, Kubin, he has retired from Bonn University. Yeah, he told me that there's another document to show that a quite famous author, Brexit, read the Dao De Jing, one of the Chinese classics, in the German translation by a Christian missionaries. And after that, he regarded that he was able to find his way as a German author concerning literary style and word building. It is quite strange for a German author. He was able to find his way of literary style and word building after reading the translation of Chinese classics. And such cases is quite frequently formed in related documents. The next page. Yeah. So historically, you could find some event. I think it is a similar dream shared with that by Chinese people. For instance, the first modern fashion of higher education in China was recorded as the government school established in the year of 1862 in Beijing. And it's quite strange that from the very beginning, many of the Western scholars and even missionaries were deeply involved in the school, in establishing a school and making the curriculum, translating and preparing textbooks for the students, and do a lot of things. And the first name in English, translated Hongwenguan, in English, they use the school of combined learning. Combined learning is not a translation word by word of the Chinese thing. In Chinese, it's the same language or the bilingual training school, something like that. But in English, they combine the learning. What is combined learning? Of course, traditional Chinese knowledge and the Western, whatever we learn from the West, especially Europe at that time. So before the public school of the combined learning was established, there exactly is actually a long history in China of old-style private school, 私塾, or various academies of classical learning, 书院. But anyway, after the establishment of the combined learning school, everything has been reshaped and transformed greatly in the higher education. The next slide, please. This is the photo taking the opening ceremony for the school. And you may find a lot of officials with typical gown, official gown for China, Qing dynasty. And in this area, there are some Westerners with the academic gown in Western style. They took the picture together. The next page is one of the professors and also missionaries invited to establish such a school. And he was appointed as secretary, principal of the school. His name is William Martin, a missionary came from the United States. And this is a picture of William Martin and his Chinese colleagues and some students in a studio or study room with a background of Chinese painting and Chinese poetic couplet. This is the content in Chinese of poetic couplet. And the calligraphy is quite famous. This name is a great name in the later part of Qing Dynasty. The next page, please. So, in this case, I think the typical ideas of Chinese civilization could be maybe summed up with three positions. The first is practically used among intellectuals even nowadays. we normally say 读万卷书行万里路 literally translated as reading thousands of books, traveling thousands of miles. But traveling thousands of miles does not necessarily mean we have to take a flight from Beijing to Sao Paulo. Took over 20 hours. It's such a long way. It does not mean such things. It implies to enrich yourself in sharing the indirect experience of others. I think that is the key meaning. And the second is a quotation from Confucius Institute, not Institute, Confucius and the Elements. The Elements. He said, I will not be afflicted at others not knowing me. I will be afflicted that I do not know others. So I think in a comparison with Western philosophy, I would use a quote from Max Muller, a founder of religious studies in the West. A scholar from Germany, but lived in the United Kingdom in most of the part of his life. And he said, he who knows one knows none. If we could only know something about our own culture, actually we know nothing. We have to learn something from others, and we could improve the knowledge of ourselves. The last quotation is also from the Elements by Confucius. Actually, it is the last sentence of the Elements. He said, without knowing their language, it is impossible to know men. So what we should do something first is to learn a foreign language. To choose a language is to choose a limitation, but to choose a foreign language is open a new door for you to know more about the true world. So I will also compare this or related this with a quotation from Western philosopher Wittgenstein. He said that the limitation of our language is probably the limit of our world. So the boundary of your word is the boundary of the limitation of your language. The next page. Yeah. This is a picture, very philosophical and quite interesting. If you learn something about that, you could do many things quite philosophical. I think its metaphysical grammar should be traced back to the archetype of this map. Yeah. This is a picture of the description of the generation of universe. So you can see this is the ultimate beginning. But the beginning is not one thing. It is composed of two different things, black and white. And in the part of the white, there's something black. Also, in the black part, there's something white. So in the philosophical term, we normally use a positive part and negative part, 正 and 负, yin and yang. So in this, in accordance with this fact, you will understand that the one is actually generated from the mutual change of the two elements, or even more elements, in the state of one like. But it is not one. It's something like one, but it is composed through the mutual exchange with different things, different elements. Yeah. So it could be taken as a starting point. You may find it is composed of different things, positive and negative. And for the positive, you could find the positive part and negative part. For the negative or black, you could find the white one, black one, negative, positive, negative, and so on and so on. Yeah. So that is the one like composed of two elements. The two elements generate four directions or four phenomena. And the four phenomena generate 8 diagrams. That is the original Chinese idea in one shape, one map. Another page, please. This is a way that you could learn how to keep such a complicated philosophy with just your 3 fingers. The next page, please. Now, the 3 fingers, I divided it into 3. parts. And this is a part with original Chinese characters to show such a 8 diagrams in a philosophical way. 乾坤离坎艮震巽兑 is quite complicated. But this part is easy. You know that heaven, earth, sun, and moon, mountain, or thunder, or wind, and river. So, if you parallel it with numbers, you could get the number, 8 numbers in this way. So with 3 fingers, you can tell a lot of things of traditional Chinese philosophy. And to be honest, it is a way for some people, even some beggars, to for fortune tellers, for tell you fortune. The next page. So in the Book of Changes, one of the earliest Chinese classics, you may read such a typical words. The change has Taiji. Taiji is the one like composed of 2 different things. Yeah? The change is the mutual change of the 2 opposite elements composed the one. Yeah? And that generates 2 elements. 2 elements generates 4 phenomena. 4 phenomena generates 8 diagrams. And in the book of Lao Tzu, I mean Dao De Jing, also a classic of China, Dao generates 1, 1 generates 2, 2 generates 3, 3 generates all things. It looks like a rhyme for children, but anyway, it is also something described in the Greek philosopher Pythagoras. I will cut it out because it is very complicated way to compare with each other. But what I would like to mention is that in Song Dynasty, there's another famous philosopher, Zhou Dunyi. He interpreted this as non-polar. Yeah. This is the original beginning. We think the original beginning means something like a suprapolarity, because it is composed of 2 different things. So it is taken as a one just because it's a polarity of different elements. Yeah. But anyway, he believed that non-polar means a suprapolarity. What does it really implies? I think if we take the formula of mathematics, it should be indicated as this. I'm not so sure how to read it in English. I'm not so sure. 2, 0 plus equals 1, something like that. Sorry. During my time for a high school student, I was sent to a forum because it's just a time for Cultural Revolution. So it's quite hard for me to read the mathematics formula. It's not a mathematics, it's a philosophy. Yeah. The next page. So in this case, I think inclusiveness, reciprocity, which means mutually shared, mutually fixed each other, and mutually preconditioned each other, are the key terms for Chinese philosophy. Of the combination of the traditional Chinese learning and the European learnings. So I think if we could show some vivid cases, I would like to use the next page, some photos in a Buddhist temple, Shaolin temple. I'm not so sure if any of you has been there or not. It's quite famous for Chinese Kung Fu. But I think for me, I think that this ability is even more precious than the Chinese Kung Fu. Because it is believed to be a technique to describe the unity with 3 religions. 3 religions mean Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. And the inscription described the integration of why he thinks the 3 religions should be integrated together. And the last 2 sentences, the next page, the last page is the last one. Yeah, no, not the next one.
Sorry.
Yeah, yes. The last sentence is like this. Yeah. So in English, I can say the 3 religions are homologous. 9 wisdom are complete. Hundreds of schools share one principle, and thousands of thoughts lead to one way. This is the next page. And on the tablet, the most interesting thing is the sharing basics of 3 masters of religions. And return to the go back. Yeah, this. Yeah. From this direction, you can recognize this is the face of Buddha. This is the portrait of Buddha. But, yeah, just like this, it's a Buddha with a scripture in hands. The next page. If we cut the portrait into 2 pieces, you can easily recognize this is the right side of a face. This is the left side of another face. The 3 faces composed together as the face of Buddha. But this part is believed to be the face of Confucianism. And this is believed to be the face of Lao Tzu, the master of Taoism. Why? The only difference is here, the cap. This is the typical cap for Confucian intellectuals. And this is for the Taoist monks. The most interesting thing is that the 3 masters of 3 religions share one scripture. They return to the last page. Yeah. The only thing they share is the one scripture. It is a sacred book. How could different religions share one sacred book? It is quite strange. To be honest, I think the only possible sharing for the different religions of one scripture is not Chinese religion, but the Western religions. For instance, the Jewish Tanakh, Christian Bible, and the Islamic Quran could find a lot of similar things in the original texts, but you cannot find so many similar things in Chinese Buddhism. The next page, please. The next one. Oh, and you could even find different pictures with a similar image. This is the stone in a tomb discovered in Yuan Dynasty. And it is composed of 2 designs. This is a shape of a cross. Of course, it's a typical Christian symbol. And this is a lotus, the symbol of wisdom for Buddhism. They combined the 2 symbols together in just one stone for a tomb of a Christian. This is also a stone discovered in Yuan Dynasty, cross and lotus. It's quite strange. The next page. Not only at ancient times, but even nowadays, in the later part of Qing Dynasty, you will find this quite famous painting, which is preserved in the North Cathedral in Beijing, in the city of Beijing. It is quite famous in Europe. It is called the Chinese Maria. But for Chinese people, very few could recognize it's a portrait of Maria and Jesus. Yeah. I think from the color of their gowns, the design of dragon, the phonics, it's easily for Chinese people to take it as a portrait for the empress of Qing Dynasty and the young emperor. But it is believed to be Maria and Jesus. The next page. In Europe, that is a typical Maria. It is called the Lotus Maria, discovered in a small village in France, I think. The next page. Even more strangely, I took this picture personally in the ordinary people's family, and not so far from the city of Beijing, only about 2 hours drive from my university in the suburb of Beijing. It is noticed that on the top of the iceboard, there are 2 portraits of Maria. The larger one is Chinese Maria, and there's a smaller one is Lotus Maria. So that is a typical case to show what religious practice is really like nowadays in China. Incredible. The next one. So I think what we should do from taking the history and going back to the history of the missionaries, Christianity and Buddhism and the offer and so and so. I think what we should do is try to consider the past in our interpretation of the present. So it has been always in the procedure of generation and transformation, talking about culture and tradition, which is impacted and being impacted, which is constituted as well as constituted, but never stays in its original state. I think Chinese culture is the most typical case for the fusion of nationalities, traditions, and ethnicities. Okay. And so for the tradition of Chinese people, or Chinese culture, you may find we actually got a lot from a lot of resources from other cultures, from other parts outside of our own world. But the most important thing is trying to make whatever we learn internalized as a part of our own culture. So in the operation and the function of mutual interpretation, understanding, and mutual reflection, sometimes you can find the truth that contradiction could be contradictory, not always contradictory. Contradiction can be made something like a contradictory. So to change the word, when we interpret others, we are also interpreted by others. When we translate a text from the West, we are also translated by the text. So I will end up the presentation with a poem, with a modern poem, a beautiful reading. So I think this poem shows some lessons we took from a Spanish theologian, Panic. He said that we have to recognize the importance of me consciousness. What does he mean by me consciousness? I think he means the subject is not always the I. The I could be also recognized in the form of me. That is very important. So with the help of me consciousness, we can understand relationality, mutuality, and reciprocity. So in this case, the other is not the projected other, is not the other through our projection. The other is not the other through our imagination. We should let the other be other and learn something from other. So like what is described in this poem, when you watch the scenery from the bridge, you are actually the scenery for another watcher from balcony. The bright moon adorns your window, while you adorn another's dream. The English translation is not so good, but the Chinese is much more beautiful in 5 minutes. So the last sentence to end up as a summary of this presentation. I think flourishing here or there, economically, culturally, philosophically, in whatever sense, flourishing in different parts is not a choice, but mutually connected and even preconditioned. That's all. Thank you.
I must say, it's so difficult to speak after Professor Yang and before Professor Vizzatini, as they are all bosses. He is my boss, he is your boss, and they are all masters. So I feel lots of pressure. Anyhow, I will do my presentation, do my job. 孔文这边刚才放哪了？后面啊，桌面。Is it the this? Yes, right, right. Uh, Professor Yang talked about philosophy elegantly, but my presentation is more practical about policy, about reality. So, my meaning of interpretation means that the research question is OBOR, One Belt, One Road, what does it mean? How strategic it is and how special it is. As according to the Chinese understanding, it's very special. It's nothing like before anything in the history. And this is a brilliant project. Is that brilliant? That's my question. And I will do that. So actually there are many, many other plans to try to revive the Asian trade routes. So I will also just say something about the other initiatives. And then I will talk about the Chinese approach and Chinese initiative. And I will look into some discussions and the final ones about my own thoughts. This history, Silk Road, goes back to Han Dynasty. And how to produce silk actually is the top secret of a nation for a few hundred years. Until the 600 after Christ, then the silk technique spread to the West. But before that, it's actually the most precious stuff the Chinese can produce. Here, the picture on the left side is the earliest piece of silk we found now. It's from Han Dynasty. You see, and the other one is also a symbol to tell. Actually, the Chinese know the worms, and as it's a kind of the worm is worshipped by the people. Uh, and the Silk Road linked South and Central Asia with Middle East and Europe. What are the leading powers? I think there are three axes. Roman Empire, after Roman Empire, is Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantine, and then Tang China. So that's the Silk Road when it's very prosperous. These are the main axes. And why the Europeans want silk? Because of Byzantine Church. They want brilliant ceremony. So they import a lot of silk from China. That's the origin. And these trading routes actually were still in use until 19th century. So it's last for a long period of time. And it's named after a German scholar in 1877. At the same time, we also have maritime trade routes. And these routes covered the west coast of Japan, Chinese coast, Southeast Asia, and also the Arab links. And it has another name, the Spice Road. It's between the Southeast Asia and other parts of this Indian Ocean and Persian Gulf and these regions. And until 16th and 17th century, a lot of rivalries just appeared when the Europeans became very, very powerful. These are the historical Silk Roads and the spice routes. This is just for commerce. We can see the whole view picture. And this is the picture of Tang Treasure. Is from a shipwreck. We can see the Chinese products actually has already just heavily influenced by the Islamic culture. It's produced in China, and it's believed it's actually is a link between Oman and Indonesia. That's the roots the historians has found. And this part, Professor Yang spoke a lot, so I will skip. So what are the competing visions for reviving these ancient trading routes? Here we can have several initiatives, Russians, in actually 2014, and they initiate the Euro-Asian Economic Union. The Kazakhstan has their own version of this kind of linking initiative. And the US, they try to have a safer Afghanistan. So during Obama administration, they raised this called New Silk Road. And then India has its own project. This actually, because of Indian Ocean, historically very, very busy trading routes. So CAS has its own project. Actually, it's also supported and raised in UNESCO. It's a cultural project. And UNDP also gave this kind of similar project called Trans-Asian Railway Project. We can also call it Iron Silk Road. And there is another Schiller Institute, is a non-governmental organization, has also his own plan for this. So I want to show you not only the Chinese try to revive this, but when the Chinese raises, when it's actually quite near. It's in 2013. President Xi made two speeches and mentioned this. The first one is in Kazakhstan, and one month later, in the meeting in Southeast Asia, he raised this project called 21st Century Maritime Silk Road. And actually, the centerpiece is to build an infrastructure and trade network in order to improve the interconnectivity of Asia, Africa, and Europe. Here, Latin America is not yet included, but don't worry. Next one, Latin America is also included. Belt and Road Initiative, actually, one is firstly raised, that we call it One Belt, One Road. Then, sadly, some friends, foreign friends, asked, well, only one. So, how about others? Then the Chinese think about it and then change the English translation called Belt and Road Initiative. But nobody uses it. Like here, our conference topic.
I personally never use open. I always use Belt and Road.
Oh yeah, that's not so many. Yeah, BNR, Belt and Road Initiatives, yes, and that's the official translation, not OBOR actually, because it seems too exclusive when we use OBOR. Yeah, just the one. It's just not so happy for others. And that's the roughly the scope of the Belt and Road initiative covered, the area covered. And there are lots of special events happened after this initiative. Like in 2014, the Chinese have the Silk Road Fund. And then others are just to give money. And then we also raised 6 economic corridors. So how much area we want to cover, we can see from this picture. So that's the roughly linking routes already just raised by Zhang Gaoli, the vice premier of China. And here is an even better picture, maybe just for you to understand how much area is covered. You see, the blue one is the maritime routes, and the black one is the land routes. I won't go to the details. Here we can see the coverage in terms of area, Chinese mainland. Oh, this is a politically speaking, mainland China is a wrong term. The Chinese hate this term. We want to make it as Chinese mainland because when we use it, it sounds like two China. Taiwan and another China. But anyhow, this is I just used this map, so I showed it here. And the blue one is the you can see more clearly about the area which is covered by this initiative. And the biggest event this year is the Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation. A lot of heads, government heads, came to Beijing to attend this. And I think next year there will be another event called the First China International Import Expo. You see, before China doing import and export expo. But now China wants to emphasize we want the others' products as well. We truly want them. So they just preparing for this and make it a big event next year. Okay, what's the Chinese approach? Okay, this approach is in the context when China has over-industrial production capacity and a lot of foreign reserves. So there is a real need to invest outside China. And the Chinese are also experiencing a very special period, which was just the recent 200 years. We never feel that China is more, in terms of material power, is more powerful, and there is a growing assertiveness just inside China. That's also for sure. And another thing is China is both very, very energetic, but on the other hand, it's getting old. It's aging society. So now some part of the economy seems not so sustainable if we still use this. So under these circumstances, and then we have the economic new initiative. If we look at the decision-making process, how comes the OBOR or the BNR? This BNM, this gradual shaping of the initiative is quite clear. So it's not something, when it's first come out, it's a great plan. Actually, it's in the process and gradually evolved and developed. So I think when the Chinese President Xi Jinping visited Kazakhstan, he tried to have something new to offer to the host. And then there is a sort of One Belt initiative. That's, I think, the beginning. And so the impact of Chinese diplomats and enterprises has a very important impact during this initiation of this project. That means actually the Chinese businessman has done business in that area, and the Chinese diplomats think, well, if we have this a bigger project, it's possible. So maybe that's the process. Because I've talked to a lot of diplomats and think tanks researcher. I asked them, who has this brilliant idea? And nobody can tell. And they just say this, and according to my understanding, this is my guess. So anyhow, I don't see such a whole plan suddenly come out. I think it's just evolved gradually. And why I say foreign government also has an impact, because the British government complained and asked Xi Jinping when she visited Britain, he said, how much area this plan will be covered. Then the Chinese think, oh, One Belt, One Road is not a good term. And then they change the term, the English translation. And of course, the role of the highest authority plays a very important role of this initiative. And after this has been become the party's doctrine, is a national strategy, and then everybody become very excited, try to seek the opportunity. we can see the Chinese local governments and the businessmen all feel very, very excited about this plan because we try to find economic opportunity. If the governments can evolve, and then it will be easier for them to have a new opportunity of economic development. And now we can also see some academics involved in this Belt and Road Initiative try to propagate and interpret it to explain this. Anyhow, I couldn't see it as just a ready there plan. And during this initiative, there are some Chinese concepts. The very specific, very typical Chinese economic thinking is like this: connectedness of infrastructure. We have even another more saying of the local people. We say, in order to get wealthier, construct the road first. This is not so philosophical at all. It's just too real. But anyhow, why I put them here? Because during the discussion with my colleagues, they said, oh, now the Chinese want to have the Chinese solution to the world. And I asked, what's the solution? He said, oh, in order to get rich, and then construct the road first. Well, at least this is one of my most intelligent, clever young colleagues explain like this. So I think it can be a kind of interpretation of this connectedness of infrastructure. And also I think gradually the Chinese want to put their own vision when they try to involve in the global governance. And the official language is what? The community of common interests. And now the new version, the newest version from this new party congress is a community of shared future for humankind. Or before, the even a little bit earlier version is the shared destiny. This kind of term is a kind of slogan. And scholarly, before that, long before that, we have some scholars who have already tried to think what's the Chinese alternative we can contribute to the world about the future world order. And so Professor called Zhao Qingyang developed this, 天下. 天下 means all under heaven. I think very much like Professor Yang has just mentioned, what's the Chinese philosophical understanding of the world? This is all under heaven. And the Chinese think the Western thinking is too self-centered. We try to have a world, we understand the world as a kind of relational world. It's not a self-interest-centered world. So just like Professor Yang has already mentioned, it's a reciprocity, relational, these kind of things. I think it's something abstract. So at least we try to make our audience, all audience in the world, understand it. So that's why I think I need to do something and try to persuade myself, because I don't have that much knowledge like Professor Yang. He knows the Chinese philosophy very well. I just try to use the current language to try to tell what does it really mean. The evolving implementation of OBOR, or the Chinese version, I just used the term here we are using. I think the most important tool of the Chinese investment, the money, and the technology, and also the construction team. This means the Chinese are really good at construction engineering, and they have good heavy equipment. That's why the Chinese can build a lot of beautiful bridges and roads, and also involved in many countries these kind of traffic projects. And this part is really our strong points. And from the forum, international forum, we can also see, and from IIIB, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, we can also see the Chinese trying to build a framework, and which is internationalized, which is just can be accepted by all the international partners as well. And then the Chinese know the business just happened in an area which is, politically speaking, and in terms of security, full of risk. So the Chinese also try to collaborate with the government, especially for the PPT programs. And the Chinese expectation is, when we do this, we'll just have a renaissance of transcontinental rail transport, because now we use flights more, but the Chinese now have built the roads, and the cost of this continental transportation can be much, much cheaper. This is the very important part, and ultimate, the final result will be a path of peace. Of course, there might be a lot of disputes on this, but at least there is a logic. When we connect the world, when we have more trade, more opportunity, economic opportunity, the world will be more peaceful. Now the problem is we have already just a net of railway in the Euro-Asia continent, but the problem is these rail gauges are different. So when we go to Kazakhstan, have to change the wheel. That's the problem. Here we can see the Chinese local people are very passionate to attempt to involve in this network. So whenever they have this new route, they will have a big celebration. So that's the picture for this celebration. There are lots of disputes and criticism and suspects towards Chinese initiative. The first one Chinese is suspected is about the motivation. What the Chinese really want? Win-win solution. That's the first period of Chinese interpretation of this initiative. They think, oh, we can make the China threat thesis just to calm down, because we also share the opportunity with others. And we just transmit this overcapacity and can have a good result. That's lots of Chinese believe so. But when time is going on and we try to make it a beautiful, even beautiful project, then now more political values and more future-oriented words attached, sort of build a better world. Then different people have different understanding. The Chinese think, well, we are good businessmen, we won't exploit others, and we won't have a political interference about other countries, so we can do business nicely, and this kind of good business can produce good results for the world. This is always very important part of the Chinese business logic. But others won't agree with that. Here I put the Egyptians. Egyptians just a term, but of course it has a case. I have some interview with those people who are involving in these OBR projects, and they said, well, the Egyptians don't think this is business. This is just a free gift. They don't want to do business with the Chinese. They just want to receive the free gift. So that's one of the interpretation. And the Europeans have another logic. They think, well, the best way to change the world, to have a better world, is to just provide aid, but with a very clear aim. Just the aid for promoting good governance, so on and so forth. So actually, they attach a lot of other conditions with these aids. And then it won't be strange to suspect that the Chinese has some geopolitical motivation. So want to seek these benefits. And then we truly encountered with Russia, US, and Europe. Just like Professor Shi has already mentioned in the morning session, actually China and Europe just far away between each other. But when we go to Eastern Europe and the Europeans complained, the European Union, I think that this is the German foreign minister, he complained that China should treat European Union as one, not divided Europe. Did you heard of this? And this is a very harsh attack towards the Chinese because the Chinese want to have closer relationship with the Eastern Europe. And Eastern Europe also long for this economic opportunity. But these made the European Union very unhappy. So at least in this term, in this regard, there is some conflict. And there is also some discussion about the nature of economic ties. The Chinese believe we are building up a new value chains. And this new value chain isn't equal, isn't just a fair, but others won't think in that way. There is so disputes. And when we talk about civilization, I think Professor Yang has already talked a lot, but I think also we have some Chinese academics worried about if we go to the Islamic area, this civilization, it's not so easy to do business with them. And even we can import some political and security risk into China. So these we can also take it as the limitation of cultural exchange. Will can benefit, but on the other hand, it can be a threat. So I think the center question should be, can everybody benefit from OBOR as the Chinese have already done? Invite everybody who is interested in OBOR to come to China to attend this international cooperation. I think there are several logics happening at the same time. The logic of market economy, the logic of strategic rivalry, and the logic of all and the heaven order. I think the last part, some Chinese are trying to make it a true thing. But as I think about it, my understanding is just to try to combine some things all together. And it can be something really different from all the other initiatives. I'm not so confident in saying that. Anyhow, at least the Chinese want to have something special, not as the other projects already appeared. Let's have some comparison with Europe and the Chinese way of doing business in other parts of the world. I take the two examples. One is about the Central Asia. Central Asia and it's kind of the Chinese neighborhood, the Chinese neighboring country. And I take Mediterranean area as the Europeans' neighboring country. So the Europeans has done what? There is a Barcelona process. I don't know if you already know this. It was already raised in 1995. Actually, this area, I think the Europeans already noticed long before. They said they think actually this can be an economic opportunity, but also can calm down this area in order to make European continent more safer. But look at Arab Spring. Look at nowadays the Northern Africa. I don't think it achieved what it does intend to achieve. China Central Asia Economic Cooperation, will it a good one? For this part, I think at least the business as is just okay, but still I'm very careful in giving a bright future. I'm not that confident. Let's also look at Africa, how to do business, have economic cooperation with Africa. In between Europe and Africa, we can see Cotonou agreement. The Europeans are famous for their generosity with when they in helping some developed world, and I think the Chinese admire this part a lot, but when I talk to some European scholars who are doing African study, and their answer is the Europeans didn't achieve as much as the Chinese has achieved. This is at least one of the impression I got. The Chinese doing business with the Africans, they don't pay much attention to good governance, so the Chinese got a lot of criticism. But at the same time, the economic outcome seems not so bad. Of course, we have a lot of failure, but at the same time, also some success is also very, very obvious. Here I take an example of the strategic railway and this lunatic express happened before in Africa, and now the Chinese, because it's too old, it's built by the British. Now the Chinese has rebuilt it, just the Mombasa to Nairobi standard gauge railway. Before it is a meter railway, and when it's building that railway, a lot of debate happened in British government, British Parliament, because it's very expensive and a lot of blood and death. Here we can see the first picture on the upper part. Actually, everything is copied from the Chinese, and the Chinese gave the equipment, the technology, and also the uniform and the way of training these cuisine. That's the example. And I think the Chinese will do more in Africa. Well, let's go to the conclusion part. How strategic of these OVOR and how special? I think it has become from economic diplomacy into a grand strategy. The Chinese really think the Chinese are disliked and feared by others. So we have to change. We have to find a way to solve the problem. And then, what's the best part of the Chinese? The economic power. So how to use the economic power into a good tool to have a better international environment, even a better world. I think that's the main theme of OVOR. So it's first just doing business, and then it has become a grand strategy. But does this grand strategy very special? If I use the term for those international studies people are familiar with, the term I will choose is the liberal track with Chinese characteristics. Still don't totally go beyond the current world format. That's my understanding. Professor Yang maybe don't agree with that, but that's my understanding. Market economy is very important. So that's why the Chinese pro-globalization. Just that when many parts of the world are anti-globalization, the Chinese are not. Because Chinese benefit from market economy a lot, and if we just use the similar logic, it seems the Chinese, well, the world can be better. And politically speaking, it won't be like the liberal thoughts, liberal idea, that much radical. So in terms of the politics, in terms of the political liberalism, the Chinese are very conservative, very selective. The Chinese don't want to be in the same camp like with the Europeans, with the United States. This one, I think, this is the Chinese characteristic. So it's a kind of a selective liberalism. And also, it's also combined with some elements of realist interest thoughts, but the Chinese try to make it more enlightened and interest, but when they are doing business, they're definitely very pragmatic, not like the Europeans, their way. And the last thing I want to share with you is my own learning process. When I heard about this, when I see so many people, so many colleagues are very excited about OBOR, I'm just very doubtful about this. So I'm not a optimistic person. Now I'm getting better. Why some stories or some experience share with you? I have a student in my class who is from Uruguay, he's from Latin America. He joined a delegation to have an investigation of Chinese opportunity, economic opportunity. And when he came back to Beijing, he told me, oh, if I want to introduce my country to the Europeans, I don't think they will want to listen to me. They don't think the Uruguay will have much economic opportunity. But every Chinese city, when they receive this delegation, they are just received warm welcome. And every city try to provide some good condition, put some attractive things for the Uruguay businessman. They want to do business with the Uruguays. Here, from his experience, he said, well, I do think OBOR has a real meaning and have a future for us as well. And my former student worked for the China Export and Credit Insurance Corporation. And his information for me is that mostly the Chinese business are just again benefiting, not just economically failed. And this getting a lot of new economic success. And it seems to me in Africa, in Pakistan, these two areas are the best part of OBOR. But other parts may have some difficulty. But at least there are some achievements. So when I look back of the history, I think the Chinese at least try to have a sort of pursue or some sort of interest which is an enlightened one, not so narrow-minded, just the national interest. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Young and Professor Wu. I don't have too many things to say after these two impacting conferences. It's not only a panel, but two conferences. And I would like just to do some remarks as an historian. And I would like to not to see the things very closely, but travel to the moon and see Earth, what is going on with those initiatives. I will speak from here because I feel uncomfortable. I feel like a preacher. And so I prefer to do like a professor. The first one in German. In 1947, when the British ended the formal domination of the country, and famous Indian historian stated that this year it started the end of the Gama era, Vasco da Gama, the famous Portuguese commander of ships, and the market, the end of the not only the independence of India, but marked the end of the domination of maritime empires over the continental one. This was the old map. You see in red and black the bridge areas in India. You see the Japanese Empire and the French, and the Dutch, and the Russian in the north. And so it's only the formal domination, the direct domination of Asia. You see, this huge continent very divided in the past. And I'd like to stress something that between Karachi and Tokyo, to make an ellipse now, you can put half of China, and more than 50% of the humanity, the mankind, live there today. So it's a lot of people. And so this cycle of development in East Asia and now in South Asia, and with these initiatives going to the interior of the continent, is only a small step in the recovery what happened in the past. And the problem is not solved. In 1949, when the People's Republic of China was founded, there were more push for political emancipation from all the continent, with a lot of conflicts that followed. But the continent was still divided by the Cold War, and even between socialist countries, and even it was economic and development. So it's a tough poverty in the region. You can pass some. This is only to show that this is the common map. Normally we use this one now, but it is a world map that shows this position. We have a mass of land in this side. We have more ocean than land in the Western Hemisphere. And during 5 centuries, we saw the domination of a small part of the world in geographical terms and in human terms that dominates the oceans, and in dominating the oceans, dominate the links between people in all the sides of the ocean. So to control the sea, and now today to control the air, is a condition of world power. And many countries and many people remain in the side of this process of domination. Here we have a partial map, because when we saw the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, there was an emergence of many new countries and a wave of instability in Central Asia. This is only a partial map. You can see the problem that touched Tibet, Xinjiang, and the new republics in the Central Asia and the South. You see the problem like instability, terrorism, and separatism, and the problem of old borders that were not already very clearly fixed and established with a common agreement between the people. So we see something different now, because normally economic actions depend also on the political ones. And you have something new. In Brazil, nobody knows almost nobody knows about this because it's a bad word in the Western world. The Shanghai Five and later Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It is very important because it was linked China, Russia, Kazakhstan, and the small mountain countries, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, and later Uzbekistan joined the group. And in the last year, India and Pakistan also joined the group. And there was an evolution from security cooperation because the power vacuum that followed the disappearance of the Soviet Union was very dangerous in this region because there's some evils, terrorism, separatism, and extremism. And this organization moved also to the economic cooperation. So in the last one, you can see this. What is the meaning? My colleague did a very good speech about all the details and this initiative, the perceptions about that. It's not only to project China outside, and this is not only a Chinese strategy. The other countries were involved in this initiative. It's a collective work in some ways. And what is the importance? So this area of instability turned in an area of not only for cooperation, but it's not only a railroad or a road that was built or some oil fields and gas fields in developing the area, but is a development corridor. And it established a continental link, and this is new in terms of 5 centuries of history. It was shown here that it existed in the past, and suddenly it was a domination from the ocean, and these old empires will remain aside in history. Now they are recovering, and this is very important to establish a new geopolitical trend in the world. It will connect the Middle East or West Asia, not from the oceans, but from the mainland. And this will connect also Africa and European Union, the European countries in general. Europe is normally balancing between 2 different perspectives, or the Atlantic one or the Eurasian one. And I think this will solve the problem now, not with the debate or political pressure or diplomatic pressure or military capacity. To don't buy the economy itself because it's something rational. And so at the same time, it will avoid some kind of provocation at the sea. Because I think the people in Asia, there's a very good memory of history. What happened in the past, and distant past, and recent past also. How the world was started from the ocean, controlled by this old power. And so this is a very important initiative. And I think this will, I'm more optimistic. At the short term, I'm not very optimistic, but in the medium and the long term, I'm optimistic. And so it is a very clever, a very intelligent initiative. And it's not a plan of a small group of people that works to a strategy to dominate the others, because the others are not naive. Even if you go a small country in Africa, you talk to the people, they are not naive. They understand clearly what they can expect from one country or another country. So they need an initiative, and this is a very good initiative. And I think this will write the history of this century. The third one. This is the content. Thank you, and I call back my two colleagues to answer the question. Please. Yes.
Sorry for this.
Questions?
A lot of thanks for the event presenters, and I think the Professor Yang make us excellent and wonderful, talk. But on the other hand, your talk cover on solid ideas, so there must be a lot of doubts. And I only have 3 doubts among other doubts. First, circle in contemporary Chinese discourse seems to be a continuing existence through at least more than 2,000 years. But in fact, that the circle, and whether in Chinese concept or other concept, and have been disrupted so frequently. For example, and shortly after Wudi's death, up to 3 kingdoms a year, and almost roughly 250 years, according to most Orthodox Chinese ancient historiography, 后汉书, and the Chinese West 西域六通六绝, and this means that only 250 years, and it disrupted 6 times at least. And this means that this phenomenon is very, have a contemporary implication, because there are a lot of elements of risks and potential dangerous and other, disruptive or unwonderful elements. And so, in history, and it must be there will be a power, or at least a few powers. They, for their own motivation or for common good, they have to protect themselves. And so, in Chinese contemporary literature on battlefield, so few people talk about these traditional historical dangers and costs and so on. The second doubt is that I think this is a very interesting thing. Why Buddhism and relatively successful to spread in China while Christianity failed. I think that all of the interpretation you raised and not sufficiently convinced me, because and to the end of the Eastern Han destiny and to the Han reunification, and this the almost 4 centuries, I termed the Chinese repopulation, 重新野蛮化. And in these darkest age in China, especially during 五胡乱中, and Chinese suffered enormously. Then Buddhism, and always, compared with Christianity, remarkably more passive, coming toward your sufferings. So this is, I think, that is more compatible with the greatly suffered Chinese people at that time, and much more than Christianity. Maybe this is a very profound and cultural interpretation. The third, of course, I will finish because I have a lot of doubts. Third is that the Silk Road, according to Chinese historical, interpretation and records, and it seems that the created first of all by we Chinese. I still stop it. For example, and before Wudi, the Xi, the Chinese West, in fact, had controlled by the Xiongnu Empire, Hans, and after it crushed the Dalos. And during this period, and I guess that there's also already some connectivity and between the city-states, different cities of Xu, which controlled and by Han Empire. So, of course, they unfortunately have no, detailed records. But I guess that maybe the proto Silk Road and maybe first created by Hans, not by we Chinese. And so finally, I think that our knowledge of Silk Road mostly come from our own records. I think that we should have health a bit of doubts, and we should learn other people's knowledge about the same thing, and then we could have a right understanding of the history, and it could help us to avoid and make some unfortunate involvement too wide, too deep, and finally found out we spread too much.
Yes, a brief comment because in the plane you may continue this discussion to reach China again.
Actually, before my presentation, one of my colleagues suggested that the more you talk, the less you'll be questioned. And that is the reason why I occupied so much time. But anyway, I talked a lot, and I'm questioned even more. And anyway, I think Professor Shi is a quite influential expert in political studies and political international relations or whatever. So we may use the same or the related historic documents in different ways. So I think he opens at least the 3 chapters for continuing the forum. We can make a judgment politically or even in the sense of geopolitical or in accordance with historic record. But I think religiously or theologically, especially based on the religious studies by Western scholars, I think it seems to be even more positive. And I think that whatever we get from the Belt and the Road, even though the Silk Road may be described by Chinese person or whatever, but anyway, I think it could be explained more positively.
Is there a possibility that we invest too much and get so little?
Yeah. And for instance, the scholar I mentioned from the Leiden University in Netherlands, he is an expert in Chinese Buddhist studies. But anyway, he compared the similar and parallel experience of Christianity from beginning to the end when he focused on the Buddhist description in China. So that is why I think we can give a positive answer for the whatever we get from the road, even though it is Silk Road or whatever road.
Well, thanks for the conference. Like Professor Paulo said, and then I have a question to the two Chinese professors. I think that some years ago, I read from a Chinese American Chinese girl who works for the Visa, who's the president from Visa, and she said that the problem is not how to make new ideas. The problem is how to forget the old ones. So, but in your presentation today, you show to us that you can the old and the new can coexist. Okay, you can tell us the whole history of China and how can we can project it from the future. And my question is simple. How can you do this in China? You do it like a tradition who is working in houses and you pass by generation, or is a kind of education that you have when you mix elements of enlightenment and formal education? How can you transfer the whole past of China to your students in your country to enlighten us or me in this afternoon? So,
Very good and difficult question. I think internally the Chinese really have a very strong intention to digest different kinds of cultural heritage, and at the same time keeping its own idea, its own tradition. But for me, I think it's very difficult just when you are dealing with the outside world. Internally, it's quite possible. But outside China, it's a big challenge. Like 天下, all under heaven. Actually, it's a hierarchical order. It's not a sort of a world made of sovereign states. There is a center. The center, of course, is in the cultural sense. So, of course, we try to treat each other nicely, but we still.
Not always.
Not all, but yes, we can find different traditions of the Chinese history. That's for sure. And I think nowadays, when the Chinese try to use their classical wisdom in nowadays, there is some challenge. But I think in terms of international relations, it's also good to remember when the Chinese are very powerful, the way is different from the Roman Empire. So why there is a difference? There has already been lots of research. So not so different. According to Professor Shi, there is no difference or no big difference.
Not so different as Chinese claim.
Here, I can also agree with Professor Xu. So, just as I have already said, I have some doubts. I think Professor Yang is more confident. Me, it's not that confident. I think, what's the real new thing the Chinese can bring about? Just as I have said, I have some doubts. I think that still we can interpret it or understand it in a track of liberalism and plus some elements of realism. But basically, the Chinese try to use the liberal logic to do this. But there is some cultural aspects which is quite Chinese, like relational. I think in the Western tradition, there is also, I haven't done a good research on it, but I was told relational study or relational perspective is also a part of the Western study. I will do this further. If you have some ideas, we can exchange each other. I think this kind of relational perspective should not be just belong to the Chinese perspective. I think it can be appeared in elsewhere. That's for sure. But in a totally modern new world, here I'm very, very careful to just use the classical Chinese wisdom into the nowadays practice. For this part, I'm not that comfortable and confident, but there is a lot to learn. Like I said, I don't have that much knowledge like Professor Yang. He just understands both worlds, the Eastern world and the Chinese world and the Western world very well. For this, I apologize for the lack of knowledge. But thanks for the question. It just pushed me to learn more. Thank you very much.
Do not necessarily solve. 就算你理解了，你也不一定能解决问题。
Thank you for the question and whatever you mentioned. If I could just add one word, I'd like to say that the scholar Zhao Bingliang, who emphasized Tianxia, is also one of our graduates.
Yes.
He graduated from Renmin University of China many years ago. Yeah. But anyway, I do not think all under heaven is a good translation. I think the focus of all under heaven should be heaven instead of anything in the world. He would like to emphasize something different from us, something beyond us. So in this case, we have been involved in the relation with something else, something different from us, absolutely, in absolute sense. So in this case, I think Christian theologians must have strong interest in the comparison, possible comparison of the potential connection of Chinese ideas and Western philosophy and theology. That is whatever I understand about this.
And the last question, short question, because our friends need to take a rest at the hotel and later go to eat a good barbecue with Barranco and maybe watch the defeat of the Blues.
您好，您好。Excuse me. I have a question for you, Lao Shi Jianhong. Thank you for your presentation. It was very enlightening. I am actually a master's degree here, and I'm researching the Belt and Road Initiative, and I've been studying. And I know that Belt and Road Initiative has action plan with 5 points. And I have a special question about the 5th point. It's called people-to-people bond. So I want to know a little more about people-to-people bond and the role of Confucius Institute in helping the consolidation of this initiative in the long run. Thank you.
I think I will do the question first, and then Professor Yang also know a lot of things in this regard. People-to-people dialogue, right? Here we have a very strong desire to have mutual understanding. When I do some study and observe the Confucius Institute, I know there are lots of suspicions towards this. And the Chinese way of behavior, I don't think the Chinese are liked by the world. I can feel a lot of complaint about the Chinese way of doing business, the Chinese tourists, bad behavior, many things. And also about the Chinese way to just forget much about values, forget about principles, let's do the business. And even for this, then people will think, well, the Chinese are too practical and just forget about justice and fair. In this way, we really need to have lots of contacts and the dialogue. So we have these kind of programs between Chinese and Europeans. I'm not so sure about Latin America, these kind of dialogue. But I think the Chinese have already realized that in terms of soft power, the Chinese are really not so good. In terms of hard power, I think Chinese has done a good job. But in terms of soft power, I think the propaganda way to doing soft power is totally a wrong route. Yes, this is something I really think it's such a sorry mistake. They think, well, if we do propaganda, we can win the respect. No, I don't think so. But unfortunately, it hasn't changed much. So we need to do more work on this. And Confucius Institute, I think, is regarded as a kind of bridge. But because of this kind of propaganda way of understanding soft power, I think that must be the reason. Because when I visited Australia, I heard this kind of complaint say, well, the Chinese try to organize everything. This is not the way in Australia. They are afraid that their politics is damaged by this organization. It seems many students are organized by the embassy. And this is totally unacceptable. But I don't think the Chinese really have some bad intention, but just the way inside Chinese. And outside China, they use the similar way to do things, but the result is terrible. That's my explanation of this. And so I'm positive response by the foreign audience or the media.
I like the way this morning one of your professors answered the question. He said it is the green sand or rock could be decided by the wind finally. So I think in regard with dialogue, we could understand that dialogue in quite a different way, completely different way. But anyway, sometimes the philosophy and maybe theology could be regarded as naturally dialogical. But one of the jokes came into my mind just now. You may know a philosopher in the United States, CSEC. CSEC were invited to have a dialogue with another French philosopher, Alain Badiou. And after that, he had a very interesting remark. He said, philosophy is not a dialogue because he believed that the writings of Plato in his later years are true dialogue because one of the philosophers talked about without interruption, and the other part in the dialogue just replied very briefly. Normally disagree. You are completely right. I agree with you. He said that is a philosophical description of dialogue. And then he said, normally people take the writings of Aristotle as a dialogue of Plato, Hegel as a dialogue of Kant, and whatever. But he said, actually, Hegel did not understand Kant. And Aristotle did not understand Plato. And in regard with Hegel, the greatest philosophy in modern time in Germany, is that fundamentally he did not understand anybody at all. But anyway, we normally take all of the, such persons as a philosopher. So it's quite interesting. But anyway, in some of the dialogues, maybe one part just changed the question. And that is also a creative form in the dialogue. Just as the Cicero himself, he remarked the dialogue of Alain Badiou, he changed the basic question of the Western philosophy. What is universal etiquette? What is universal? He changed it into another question. What is the philosophical promise, commitment to the question of the universal etiquette? So that is also a way to understand what dialogue really is.
Okay, I think we need to finish because we are 40 minutes late. And about the last question, I'd like to discuss my Chinese friends that about Latin America. Normally you need to know if you're talking about the elite and the middle class or the ordinary people. Because they live in the middle class. Normally they have a very strange behavior because they criticize the trade with China because China is invading our internal markets, blah, blah, blah. And then they take on the holidays, they take a plane and they go to Miami to buy Chinese goods at a good price and come back to Brazil without paying taxes. And this is our middle class. And so I think about the European people, normally they are two categories of European people, the cynical and the lost. And normally both are wrong, and they state to the other, you are imperialist. So if China is imperialist, they are jealous because the history of what they did, they do at the present. And so the perception that people has, I'm teaching in Africa, and some elite people criticize, but suddenly it started a debate inside the class because some people from Cape Verde, coming from a very poor island, if there's no Chinese food here, I have had a shoot on when I was young. It's the only way to buy a shoe, something like that, not to import from the Eurozone, very expensive shoe. And so I think this is only as an open debate. My colleague, Professor Marco Sepiti, gave us this opportunity to arrange the framework to our Chinese friends from Kremin to come here. But in fact, without our good students, we don't, we can't do much because it's very hard to arrange all this in a short time. And so I'd like to thank to the staff that support us, Guilherme Tudium, this big one, Romulo, this is Romulo, and Athos is not here today because his grandmother passed away. The people from Segov, Marcelo, Thaís, Guilherme Spanato, os nossos bolsistas, os students from Nerite, a Maria Gabriela, Joana e outros, e o pessoal do ISAP, people from ISAP, and the group of China East Asia group. So thank you very much for your support, and thank you to the Republic to attend this very intense seminar. Thank you very much.